Welcome back to Overtime here on WOTM. We shift gears from high school football to college football. Let's start with the Auburn Tigers because I think that one deserves a little bit of more space here considering now what we've seen and being able to kind of digest it for the last couple of days. Auburn, a big lead, 28-3 on Mississippi State, but Will Rogers and that staff and Coach Leach and Mississippi State came back and ended up winning that football game 43-34, the biggest comeback in Mississippi State history. Let's just first start with the game before we get into the Bo Nix aspect of it. What was maybe the sentiment I think that you could take away from Auburn after this game, judging on what they've done the entire season?
I think coming into this stretch when they started with Ole Miss and they beat Ole Miss at home, and then they go to Texas A&M, and you think, okay, they're capable of beating Texas A&M because they played really well against the teams from the West. The only time they really didn't play well in the SEC games was against Georgia. They come out, they are not the same rhythm that they've had offensively, but that kind of started in the second half against Ole Miss. They were lights out in the first half against Ole Miss, and they struggled a little bit in the second half. We'll watch. We got something to look at that a little bit later to show their first half, the second half, their last two games at home, which is a huge discrepancy. But I think that might have put a little bit of, or taken away a little bit of their confidence. And Bo Nix, I think most people would say that his confidence was the thing that could get shattered a little bit once it got shaken. Is he going to be the same quarterback coming back? Now, he cleared a huge hurdle early in the year when Finley replaced him, and he didn't pout, he didn't whine, he didn't go to mommy. He manned up, took the job back, and then he led him to a couple of victories. However, starting with Texas A&M, you kind of wondered, if they have Finley on the team, why wouldn't he in the end of the game to save him? Because maybe Nix didn't just have it, and sometimes that happens. But I think that was one of the maybe points where you looked at and you said, well, I might have overvalued him a little bit. Maybe he's not as good as I thought he was because you were riding a real high with him. However, coming out here in the first half against Mississippi State, same thing. Lights out, on fire. Okay, Bo Nix is back. And we talked about it before. Bo Nix playing ahead is a lot different than Bo Nix playing from behind. And when they lost some of that rhythm in the second half, they started to struggle a little more. And Bo Nix isn't the same quarterback when you're playing from behind.
Exactly. And you got a chance to see all of that. And Will Rogers, an excellent game for Mississippi State. Meanwhile, the other side, Bo Nix going out with the ankle injury. Coach Brian Harsin did say today that it was a successful surgery, but he's out for the rest of the year. Now they have Finley. As this now team moves forward, what do you expect to see from Auburn, from Finley, from this offense, and learning some of the lessons with which they've struggled with in the past?
Well, I know Finley is a guy that's capable. You saw what he could do at LSU. He would still be there and competing for a job if he felt like he got a fair shake. He didn't really feel like he didn't think he would be the starting quarterback. That's why he came to Auburn. I think this is what he's been waiting for. He's got obvious talent, different talent than Bo Nix. It's going to be interesting to see how he does, and then going into next year, what the situation is going to be.
Exactly. Bo Nix, 2,200 yards, 10 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. He was also the third leading rusher for the Auburn Tigers with 168 yards and second with 4 rushing touchdowns. Meanwhile, Coach Brian Harsin met the media today, kind of digested some of the parts about the loss and said some of the things that they need to do getting better from half one to half number 2.
That's kind of the tale of two halves in this game. You come out and you're playing hard, you're playing fast, you're making plays. In the second half, that has to continue. You know, that's what we have to understand as a team. You can't coast your way through the rest of the game once you come out there and have a great first half and put points on the board and then expect somebody else to make plays as they kind of gain momentum and put themselves back in a position to get themselves back in the game. When we had however many drives unanswered with points.
Meanwhile, one quick thing here. I know you're going to get to your second half point. We'll get to that in a second. But Auburn, technically, not out yet. I saw this on the SEC Network, and I had to share it because it's worth a laugh. If Arkansas beats Alabama, if Ole Miss beats Vanderbilt, and if Auburn beats South Carolina on Saturday, and then next week if Mississippi State beats Ole Miss in the Egg Bowl, if Arkansas knocks off Missouri, if Auburn beats Alabama in the Iron Bowl and Texas A&M beats LSU, Auburn still has a shot to win the SEC West. I thought that was funny, so I had to share that along. Auburn's not dead completely yet, but if any of that doesn't go through, it won't happen. I know you had something to talk about specifically as it relates to Auburn's first halves and second halves, as we kind of.
And if Woody went straight to the police, this never would have happened.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, first half, second half against Ole Miss. First half, 28 points, 311 yards, 4 of 5 drives for touchdowns. Second half, 3 points, 216 yards or 100 less, 5 drives, 2 punts, fumble, missed field goal, and a field goal, only 3 points. Go against Mississippi State now, first half. 28 points, 320 yards, 4 of 5 drives, resulting in a touchdown. Second half, 7 points, 196 yards. That's 200 yards or 180 yards less. 6 drives in the second half, 2 punts, downs, missed field goal, fumble, and 1 touchdown. So it's basically the same first halves in both games, 28 points in both games, 4 or 5 drives in both games for touchdowns, and then the second half, where's their offense? They just totally disappeared, and they stopped that momentum that they had in the first half. That, to me, was the most confusing thing, because I'm seeing how they came out against Ole Miss, and they were on fire, thinking this is great for them. That's when the struggle started a little bit there, carried into Texas A&M. They got over it in the first half against Mississippi State, and then it's right back.
Exactly, and it's one of those things where it's almost becoming a pattern now. When you have a situation with this Auburn football team, it's kind of a gut check time for the Tigers. We'll see how they do.
And I like Carson. I like Carson as a coach. I think he'll work through this.
Likewise.
This was a road bump he didn't really anticipate. I thought they would go undefeated until they ran into Alabama. But now that Nix is out, you kind of move on, learn what you can for next year, and then, except for that insane scenario that you just put up there, I don't think that's going to happen.
Neither do I. I don't think it's going to happen either. I think that bubble will get burst. But I don't think it's because of a loss at South Carolina. We'll see how that all shakes out coming up a little bit later this week. Meanwhile, let's move to Alabama and New Mexico State. Kind of a get-right situation. We knew going into the game that Alabama was going to win. How would they look? Would they look sharp? Would they continue to look like the team that we have known from last year and some of the past years, or would they continue to struggle? Well, they answered those questions early, scored a bunch of touchdowns, put away a really bad New Mexico State team. Do you think that this could be the catalyst, the start for what Alabama hopes is a run to the playoffs?
I don't think this game really showed you anything.
Sure.
I think they blew out a team they should have blown out. If they didn't, I think we'd be more worried. But you saw that Bryce Young after the game and giving credit to his offensive line. He has to have a good working relationship with his offensive line. You could look at the fact that he's making all this money, and maybe he's a little bit of prima donna. Maybe the offensive line is saying, well, look at this guy. He's making all of this cash. What are we getting? Let's kind of let this guy go through. No, but I don't think any of that's happening. But you never know when there's that much of a difference between a guy that makes money in college when you're not really supposed to. Now, it's the first time that's happening. Maybe there's a little jealousy there. I really don't think. If it did happen, I'm sure Saban would nip it right in the bud and make sure that kind of stuff doesn't go on. So that, to me, that he did that after the game and really gave credit to them was a good sign. Was a sign that they were coming together. Alabama's offensive line always is one that dominates, always is one that pounds the ball, that runs the ball well. You know when they're going to run the ball, and you still can't stop them. You look at the other things they've done well offensively this year. Jameson's been really good. Mechie's been really good, but that's it. As far as wide receivers, they don't have that really third guy. Say Bolden's been okay, but it's not like when they had Ruggs and Smith, and Judy and those types. They don't have that type of threat this year. Billingsley, you keep waiting for him to develop. Robinson is good coming out of the backfield, but he's not Najee. So they're not as strong as they were, but they still have plenty to beat you. And the more that they can run the ball, I think that the better off they'll be. So that's what I really want to see them. Run the ball efficiently, run the ball consistently, run the ball when the other team knows you're going to run the ball. Arkansas is a physical team. That'll be a good test for them. Then they get Auburn on the road where, weird things happen, and that would be perfect for Auburn to end their year, especially with it now with TJ Finley, which is going to be a little difficult for them because they have a little problem sometimes with quarterbacks that can get out and run and do, a couple other things. So that might be a little bit of a different matchup now where I think they were kind of more used to Bo Nix. They had seen him last year, seen him in the year before. Do those two things well, get ready for Georgia, And if you're an Alabama fan, you don't really want to see these games close, because these are two teams that you really should beat by 15 points and leave no doubt that you're the better team. You deserve to be in the SEC championship game. If you win that, you go into the playoff. If you don't, you won't go into the playoff.
Exactly. I think the scenario for Alabama, the beautiful thing is that the scenario is clear. Just you win 3 games and you're into the Final Four.
Right.
You lose any of these games and obviously you're out. And the thing about the interesting thing about Georgia, that game is, hey, it's a team that I think Tennessee said, hey, Tennessee was able to score on them. And I think if Alabama has the confidence that they can play with them offensively, then I think we're going to have an actual game. Not to go too far ahead, but I think that Bama's offense, especially after last week, what we've seen kind of sporadically throughout the year, this offense can put some points up on good defenses. Now, can they do it against one of the best defenses that we've seen? Who knows?
But the thing I would worry about most if I was a Georgia fan was that mental lapse that they have against Alabama. There's something that they just haven't been able to get over. You think of a couple years ago, they're up 28-14 in the SEC championship game. Jalen Hurts comes in and saved them. That's something as a Georgia fan you really didn't experience.
Exactly.
One of the funnier things the SEC Shorts guy does, and I love SEC Shorts, was they have a character called Hope that came in like a couple weeks ago, and they're like, "No, Hope, you can't come in. This is a bad time, you know."
Right.
And then they kind of ignore a little bit, and then they're like, yes, we're going to accept you, but no, we'll lose to South Carolina at home. You know, it's like, so those are the types of things that if you're Georgia, you know what you've done against some other teams where you lost games you shouldn't have, but against Alabama, you've always played well, probably played them real tough. You take the game last year in Alabama, they're up at the half. Then they have the long 94-yard completion that kind of sets the game on its ear, and then Alabama blows them out in the second half.
Right.
Those types of things have happened to Georgia the last couple of times they played. Getting over that hurdle. I want to see them be able to get over that hurdle before I'm convinced that they can beat Alabama.
Yeah, I think so too, and we'll see obviously in Atlanta if it comes down to that, if the whole crazy situation with Auburn didn't happen. We'll see how it all shakes out. Nick Saban met the media today and talked about his guys this week and what are some of the things they're focused on.
You know, we challenged the players last week to go out and play with a lot of positive energy, and I really liked the way the players did that. The execution was not always perfect, but it was certainly improved, and you know, I was really pleased with, you know, the way our players responded. I think we need to build on that. I think how you finish is most important this time of year, how you dictate tempo, the energy you play with, how you prepare. You know, all those things are critical to how you play. And I think our players, you know, hopefully are going to respond the right way.
So Arkansas is the opponent coming up this week, and we'll see how the Crimson Tide do. We'll have our picks on that coming up on Wednesday night. Meanwhile, from teams in and around the state of Alabama, how did they fare after a week of football? The UAB Blazers got another win. There's a nice little winning streak here for UAB. Now 7-3, 5-1 in their conference. They knocked off Marshall. Next up, a really tough challenge. Can they do what no team has done yet? Beat University of Texas at San Antonio. Meanwhile, Troy now 5-5 on the year after losing to Louisiana. That game coming up next week is against Appalachian State. Meanwhile, South Alabama also lost against App State this past week, so they'll get a good look at them on film. 31-7. Up next, they'll go to Tennessee, take on the Tennessee Volunteers. Meanwhile, Jacksonville State won at Lamar. They have their season finale coming up next week at Eastern Kentucky. Sanford also lost a very entertaining. It was an unbelievable game in the swamp. A little bit of a basketball score there as the Gators gave up 52 points. But it is Sanford falling at the swamp. Meanwhile, they're also playing their season ender coming up this week against Furman. Well, coming up next year in Overtime, we will talk a little more about the college football world altogether and the notable coaching jobs.